Anyone who follows true crime will know about cold cases. When leads have been chased, if indeed there are any leads, but more progress can seemingly be made. All the information will be bundled up and filed under the heading "Fuck knows." With technological and general advances in policing, there's been a growth of so-called cold case units, where old cases will be reviewed with fresh eyes in the hope that progress can now be made. But many of the chances of making progress will depend on the foresight of those who were investigating the cases at the time to ponder what information or evidence may be useful in the future. Many cases have had evidence that has been re-examined as DNA technologies have enabled the profiling of perpetrators from biological evidence, because one or more of the original investigators chose to keep and preserve the potential sources of that evidence. But sometimes that foresight comes not from the police, but from a potential witness choosing to trust their gut reaction to someone. Today's case falls into that category, and it was also the first ever case featured on the notable UK TV show Crimewatch. So today we're going back to 1983 and visiting Nottinghamshire in the Midlands of the UK to look at the case of Colette Aram. This is Murder of Crows. In 1983, the Nottinghamshire village of Keyworth was pretty close-knit, having around 6,500 residents, much as it does today. And it was the textbook example of a village where everyone knew everyone. Of course, that phrase doesn't mean that everyone is personally acquainted, but there is a familiarity the people have with each other, and this was very much the case in Keyworth. With that insulated feel comes a level of feeling safe, and no one in the village thought that their idyll could be punctured by violent crime. That's not to say there was no crime at all, or that there were no unsettling incidents. In fact, in that October, there had been a spate of girls being bothered by at least one motorist who tried to persuade them to get in their car. Girls would be honked at or would be offered lifts. But it seemed it was more of an annoyance than a serious concern. Now, on the 30th of October of 1983, 16-year-old Colette Aram was a trainee hairdresser who wanted more than anything else to be a hairstylist like her mum Jackie. And Colette was planning to visit her boyfriend Russell Godfrey. She lived on Normanton Lane in Keyworth with her parents Jackie and Tony and her brother Mark. Now, her boyfriend Russell was just 17 himself, but he had already passed his driving test. And when the two would meet up, Russell would normally pick Colette up. But his car was in the garage for repairs, so he was unable to pick her up that night. Now, knowing that her daughter wanted to see Russell, and knowing that she was without a lift that night, Colette's mum wanted to drive her to meet up with her boyfriend. But as it was a pleasant autumn evening, Colette felt that she wanted to walk, and it was only about 10 minutes away, so she left her home and headed on her way. Now, just a few minutes after she left, Russell actually called Colette's home, and Jackie told him that Colette was planning to walk over to his house. So Russell told Jackie that he'd meet Colette halfway, and he hopped on his bike and started cycling the route that she would normally take. But he didn't find her anywhere on the route. He called Colette's mum Jackie, and she immediately knew something was wrong and contacted the police. Now, the police, being as out of touch with a parent's instincts in 1983 as they seem to be today, said that it would be quite common for a 16-year-old girl to be unaccounted for of an evening. But Jackie explained that Colette would always, without exception, always say where she was going and when she was going there. But the police insisted that she call back if Colette was still missing at 10:30 p.m. Feeling frustrated, Jackie started calling all of Colette's friends and even called local hospitals in case there had been an accident. The family all went out searching for Colette with no success. She duly called the police again later in the evening, and they attended Colette's home and began trying to retrace her steps. Now, pretty soon, with darkness hampering their efforts, they curtailed the search effort for the evening with a commitment to begin again at first light, when they could better see what was going on. So the next morning, Colette's brother Mark was determined to continue his own search efforts. So he jumped in his car and headed off around the local area. But when he was driving down Thirlby Lane, checking both sides of the road as he went, he was dismayed to see an area of police tape and a significant police presence. He pulled over, and with his heart in his mouth, he started sprinting towards the cordoned off area. Police tried to stop him, but Mark burst through their efforts, and that was when he saw his sister's naked, lifeless body. Now, the police determined that Colette had been abducted, raped and strangled, and the once tranquil village was rocked by the finding of one of their own killed in such a brutal manner. She was bruised and naked, and her body had been posed in a sexually explicit way. By any standards, this was cruel and abhorrent. But this was when the police began chasing their tails, and they were mocked by a confident and smug perpetrator who actually wrote a letter to Nottinghamshire police explaining what he'd done. Now, letter hoaxes taking credit for crimes are not unheard of, so the police were understandably very wary when considering where the letter may have come from. But in the letter, the writer spoke of waiting in a hut near a riding school, having watched the girls having riding lessons, before he stole a car that had been left with the keys inside it. When they searched the hut, they found a rag with semen on it. Lovely. But it was then that they believed the letter was actually from the killer. God bless the narcissists. The car that had been stolen was a red Ford Fiesta, and there had been numerous sightings of the car throughout the course of the evening. On a housing estate in Keyworth, the car was seen at around 5 p.m. and the resident that saw the car saw it waiting on the street for around an hour, and that resident was confident that they could describe the driver. And this driver was described as white and around 25 to 30 years of age, with brown wavy hair. But as the car was stolen, the description, without a suspect to compare it to, was of little help. Between around 6 and 7 that evening, several sightings were reported, and it seemed that the car was just cruising the local area and seemingly approaching adolescent girls and trying to get them into the car. One girl was walking her dog when a man in a red Ford Fiesta stopped and asked for directions before asking the girl if she wanted a lift. But she said that the man made her feel very uncomfortable, so she declined and walked away. Equally disconcerting, a man was out in his garden at around 8 p.m. in the evening and reported seeing a man pull up in a red Fiesta, saying he was just going around the corner to visit a mate. It alarmed the watching resident that the motorist seemed to be carrying a knife, and it further confused him that the direction this man walked off in had no houses at all. So, feeling somewhat suspicious, he made a note of the license plate of the car. Shortly after this time, another witness who was inside their home said that they heard screaming, and when they raced to the window to look outside, they saw a car speeding away. Now, at around 9 p.m, a man with a description similar to that reported earlier in the evening was seen in the Generous Britain pub in Costock. Now, the barmaid specifically remembered him as he had never been into the pub before. He ordered an orange juice and a sandwich, and the barmaid noticed that he had what appeared to be blood on his hands. He gave several contradictory stories about why he was in the area, from initially saying he had taken a wrong turn to then saying he was visiting a friend who lived in the area. When he went to the bathroom, the barmaid's discomfort was such that she kept the bin bag from the bathroom, including the paper towels that the man had used to wipe his hands, and she kept this bin bag aside in case it proved important, and it would, eventually. At the time, all they could say was that blood and traces of semen had been found, but the evidence was meticulously preserved. As the search started to run out of steam, with leads drying up, a reconstruction of the crime was filmed for the BBC's new Crimewatch programme.
Hello and welcome to Crimewatch UK. Now, if you've ever worried or complained about crime, this is your chance to do something about it. The police can never solve crime on their own, of course, at least not in a country that demands the sort of liberties that we expect. They can act only on information received. So we're going to ask you to turn amateur detective and help out the professionals. This is about real-life crime, not the stuff of fiction. These are all real police officers. They're all waiting for your call. Everything you see in this programme will be for real or meticulously reconstructed from the facts.
You may find some details disturbing, but they'll only be there if it's necessary evidence that could make all the difference in solving a crime. And if you see anything tonight that jogs your memory, please call us. We hope to see immediate results. The number is 01 if you're outside London, 811 8055.
We start with a case that's chilling. Somewhere, probably in the English Midlands, there's a killer on the loose. And someone must know who he is. The police and a grieving family need your help. As you're about to see, the nature of the killing leads to the fear that he might well strike again. It's a macabre story made even more bizarre by this letter that was sent to the police by a man who claims to be the murderer. Do you recognise the style? It may have been written with a ruler and a mapping pen, and look in particular at those peculiar S's that are written in the form of exclamation marks. It's a bit like some computer shorthand. Now, the letter could be a decoy, it could be a hoax, but if you know who wrote it, you could save someone's life. In the reconstruction that follows, every detail is as exact as we can make it. The real locations and the actual vehicle the killer drove. The outskirts of the village of Keyworth near Nottingham on Halloween last year. Monday, October the 31st. At 9 o'clock in the morning, a body was found by a passer-by. A young girl had been strangled and raped with particular brutality. Colette Aram, a trainee hairdresser, was 16 years old. The previous evening she'd set out to walk to the home of her boyfriend. She never got there. This bizarre letter was received by the police 2 weeks later. The details in it suggest it's genuine and possibly written by someone with local knowledge.
Is somebody protecting this man?
Superintendent Bob Davey heads the inquiry team. Today, 7 months and 2,000 statements later, they still haven't found the killer. And without your help, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. A man who's white, aged roughly 25 to 35, with probably brown, wavy hair.
So what the hell do we know about him? He's not going to sit in his house with the word murderer written across his chest or across his back, is he? He's got some sort of sexual hang-up. He likes young kids. It's not going to be ever so obvious when you go through the door. But talk to the people, talk to the wives. Let's find him, because he's about somewhere. Colette's left in a field, don't forget that. We're dealing with a savage killing. Let's sniff him out and let's see if we can find him.
The police have built up a picture of the killer's movements from the letter and from corroborating evidence. It starts at a riding stables 5 miles from Keyworth.
I was in a hut for hours waiting for a girl to return from horse riding. No one saw me.
Yet the police are almost certain that the killer hid here while girls were riding near the hut. There are forensic clues, in particular a rag stained with human semen. And at about 4:30, something happened here that was to set off a fateful chain of events.
When the car came with keys, I could not help take it.
The next time the stolen red Fiesta was definitely sighted was shortly after 5 on an estate in Keyworth. The witness, a local resident, noted that the car was probably parked there for about an hour, and they were able to give a description of the driver. Did he visit a friend, Or if he actually lives locally, did he simply go home for tea? Then, early on that Sunday evening, in the hour between 6:20 and 7:20, the suspect is known to have cruised the neighbourhood, trying to pick up young girls. One of them had a very close encounter.
She's exercising the dog at the time. He stops and he makes some pretence of asking her the way to Walls Drive. Now that was clearly a bit of a ruse on his part, because Walls Drive in actual fact was only 50 yards away and he'd probably just passed it.
Yeah, look, come here. Can you tell me where Walls Drive is, please?
You just come out of it.
Oh yeah. Well, where are you going anyway?
Nowhere.
Do you want a lift?
No.
Oh, come on, it's warm in here, it's dry, I'll take wherever you want to go.
No thanks.
Well, what are you scared of? I'm not going to bite you. Come on. Come on, where do you want to go? I'll take you.
No.
This cruising is the kind of habit that he may well be repeating in other parts of the country. Has anyone tried to pick you up in this way?
No one knows what I look like. That is why you have not got me.
In fact, they do have various descriptions. He was seen yet again at about 8 o'clock by another important and a particularly observant witness.
Yeah. I'm just going to see some mates around there. Won't be long.
When he left the car there, he walked around the corner and then he came back and he made some comment about somebody not being in, as if it was a reference to having visited some house. Well, he couldn't have done that, because in actual fact there was no houses in that vicinity.
The witness's suspicions were already aroused when he noticed what was being carried.
Oh, yeah.
No one knows what the knife was used for, but the witness prudently took a note of the car's registration number. Colette Aram took her last walk up this hill. She left home at 8 o'clock on her way to see her boyfriend just 20 minutes away. What happened then must be speculation. But one further witness, a local resident, did provide a vital piece of information.
I know I strangled her. When a car passed, she would have got me caught. But she was not dead when I left her. Maybe the cold killed her. Cars passed when we were there. I thought she would be all right.
We're talking about Colette probably being abducted and murdered at about 8:15 on that Sunday night. At 9 o'clock that night, there's a man of the description of the man we're looking for, goes into the Generous Britain pub at Costock.
What can I get you?
A pint of orange lemonade, please. And can I have one of those cobs as well?
If we accept it's the man that went in the pub, and I think we do, is a man that, if you remember, he drank a pint of orange and lemon. Now that's an unusual drink. It is in our circles. We're pints of bitter men.
Ham, he said. Ham?
Yes, please, yeah.
On holiday, are you?
No, actually, I took the wrong turning off the motorway. No, actually, I've come up to visit a friend who lives in Barton.
Oh, 91p, please.
His stories prove to be false, but they do suggest a degree of local knowledge.
He works in the power station, but he's had a bit of an accident, so I was going to visit him in hospital. Thanks.
Oh, they've gone. Excuse me.
Where's the toilet?
Oh, just back there.
We searched and we checked in the toilets and we took possession of some of the tissues. One of the tissues was sent, in fact all of them were sent off to the forensic, and they found signs of blood and also human semen.
I go soon, and then you will never get me.
Well, the man who's determined to get him, who's in charge of the case, is Detective Superintendent Bob Davey. First of all, Superintendent, how much credence do you put in this weird letter?
Well, one's got to be open-minded about letters like this from previous experiences we've had. But there are certain aspects of this letter which make us think that it probably is genuine. That is from the man who murdered Colette.
Now, what about the description of the killer? Obviously, the man we used was an actor, and people mustn't think too much about that description. How much do we know about the killer?
Well, I shouldn't want that to mislead people, but we're looking for someone 25 to 35 years, of average height, probably light brown hair, and we know from a number of witnesses that he was wearing this brown suede or imitation suede three-quarter length coat.
Was he clean-shaven, or did he have a bit... Well, of course, he could grow a beard or cut one off since. Do we know?
Well, that's right. And in fact, a number of witnesses in this case have given varying descriptions. But we want to be open-minded about this, and we feel that at this stage he's probably clean-shaven.
And do you think that somebody out there knows or might know who the killer is, might have a good suspicion?
Well, we think so. We think that the man's got local knowledge. We think he probably lived locally at that time. And we're looking for someone who was away from his home between 4:30 that day when the car was stolen and until about 10 o'clock that night when we know the car was brought back or was seen coming back into Keyworth.
Now, this horrible behaviour that we saw, the cruising around, trying to pick up young girls, he might presumably be doing that somewhere else.
Well, this is a possibility. In fact, this is quite a likely possibility, bearing in mind his behaviour on this night. I mean, we've evidence from witnesses that, in fact, he was following young girls and cruising the area. I would think that behaviour is probably still continuing.
So, if this happens to any other young girls, you want them to report it, wherever it is they live?
Oh, yes. If anyone's been approached in this way or seen anyone behaving in this manner, if they let us know, we'd be grateful.
Is there anything else that we should know? Have you had any other information?
Well, we've had a lot of information on the case, but there's a woman that rang in. She rang the local evening newspaper, and she rang one of our police stations. She was distressed. She was anonymous. She said that she knew who had murdered Colette, and then she broke down and she put the phone down on both occasions.
She knew who the murderer was, and she hasn't rung back?
Well, this is what she said. It may be, of course, that she doesn't know, but she thinks she knows. We'd like that woman to come forward and contact us again. We'll treat whatever she says in confidence.
Right, so you want her to ring in at anybody who thinks that they have suspicions about somebody who might have been in the area at the time, and the description is a fairly broad one.
Yes,
somebody
it is.
between their mid-20s and their mid-30s.
That's right, and I certainly wouldn't want people to take too much notice of the actor or the descriptions that we've shown.
Right, Superintendent, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The number to ring...
Now, this Crimewatch reconstruction led to thousands of calls being received, but they were largely not helpful. One call came in from a woman who said that she knew who the killer was, but she seemed to lose her nerve and ended the call before any pertinent information could be passed on. Now, despite the spate of potential new leads, the investigation once again ground to a halt, and it would remain that way for more than 2.5 decades. In the period between the horrific murder and the next significant break in 2008, policing had progressed immeasurably. DNA evidence had become a core tool in the forensic toolbox, and a database of DNA samples had been created from anyone who had been arrested. And the police now had the capability to analyze historical samples if they had been well preserved, and then compare those DNA samples across an entire national database of samples. Even when samples failed to produce a match on the database, the police would routinely recheck the samples periodically, since new samples were being added to the database all the time. It was in June of 2008 that John Paul Hutchinson, then aged 20, had crashed his car while on his way to a 21st birthday party. And as a result, his DNA was taken and added to the database. When the samples from the Colette Aram investigation were being routinely screened against the growing database, it now produced a strong but partial match to John Paul. Now, obviously, John Paul didn't even exist when Colette was killed, but the match was so strong that the perpetrator must have been related to John Paul. And it was through this connection that the police approached local businessman Paul Hutchinson, who was living in West Bridgeford on the outskirts of Nottingham. Hutchinson explained that his brother Gerard must have been the killer. Gerard Hutchinson had died at age 60 and been cremated the previous January, so January of 2008, leaving no access to taking confirmation samples. But through investigating Gerard Hutchinson, they found that a hospital still had a blood sample in storage, and when they compared the DNA, they found that while it was substantially similar, it was not a 100% match. So the suspicion fell squarely onto Paul Hutchinson, and he was arrested and charged in 2009. With the weight of evidence squarely against him, Hutchinson, who was walking into court with the aid of a cane, entered a guilty plea on the 21st of December 2009. When he returned for sentencing on the 25th of January 2010, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. Ultimately, he would only serve a fraction of that sentence. At 8 AM on the 10th of October 2010, 9 months after his sentencing and after 18 months in custody, Hutchinson was found unconscious in his cell at Nottingham prison. Paramedics were called and tried to resuscitate him, and he officially died at 9:58 AM in an ambulance on the way to hospital. It is believed that he took an overdose of medication, but a post-mortem examination proved inconclusive. Hutchinson's daughter told the later inquest he had asked his wife to come and meet him in prison the day before he died, but she did not attend that meeting. I fully believe his death was a result of his narcissism and believing he deserved better from his life, so chose the coward's way out. But this story isn't about this man who was never willing to face what he did. Rather, it's about the people that suffered as a result of what he did. Colette was killed almost before she had lived, and her family had to endure a lifetime without her. While it is definitely a good thing that justice caught up with Hutchinson, it doesn't bring back the young life that he extinguished with such wanton disregard. This video is of course dedicated to Colette, Aram and her family. I hope they found ways to cope and to manage through their pain. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. Your host Samson is just over there. He's in a pout, I don't know why. But I am his fawning sycophant Steve. And we will see you when we see you.